The small town was full of excitement that day. Everyone was talking about the annual community talent show, an event that had become a special tradition over the years. People from nearby neighborhoods were gathering in the hall, chatting about who might perform and what surprises awaited them. The air smelled faintly of popcorn and freshly polished wood from the stage floor. There was laughter, hurried footsteps, and a little nervous energy floating around. Among all the performers was a little girl who was not known to many people in the crowd. She was small and shy, with big, curious eyes that often watched the world quietly instead of speaking. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her small hands fidgeted with the edges of her dress as she waited behind the curtain. She had been practicing piano for as long as she could remember. Nights had been spent in a quiet room, the soft sound of the piano echoing through the house while her family went about their routines. Her parents had noticed her talent early on and encouraged her gently, never forcing her but always offering support. She loved the piano because it gave her a way to express feelings she could not put into words. Each key was a friend, each note a part of her story. Sometimes she played just for herself, alone in the living room, her imagination painting pictures and scenes that no one else could see. Backstage, she could hear the applause for other performers. There was a group of teenagers performing a dance routine, and a singer hitting notes that made the crowd cheer. She listened quietly, her heart beating fast, knowing her moment was coming soon. She watched the stage through a small gap in the curtain, seeing the bright lights and the large crowd. Her stomach felt tight, and she wondered if she was ready. But deep inside, she knew this was her chance to share something special. Her parents stood a little behind her, smiling encouragingly. They whispered gentle words, reminding her to breathe and just enjoy the music. She nodded, trying to calm the fluttering inside her chest. Around her, other children and teenagers were warming up, some chatting nervously, some focused intently on their instruments or scripts. The backstage area was alive with anticipation, a mix of nervous energy and excitement. She thought about the long hours she had spent learning and practicing, the mistakes she had made and corrected, and the joy she had felt when a piece finally sounded right. She remembered her piano teacher's gentle guidance and how proud she felt when she learned something new. That practice, all the repetition and effort had led her to this moment. It was not about winning or being better than anyone else. It was about sharing a part of herself with the world. When her name was finally called, her knees felt a little weak, but she walked towards the stage with a careful, steady pace. The lights seemed brighter than she expected, and the hum of the audience felt louder than she imagined. She carried herself as best as she could, trying to focus on the piano in front of her instead of the sea of faces. The stage felt big and unfamiliar, but she knew the piano well. It was familiar, a friend she could trust. She sat down on the piano bench, adjusting it to the right height. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant for a moment. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She imagined herself in her quiet room, playing for no one but herself. That thought brought a small, calming smile to her face. The nerves were still there, but they felt lighter. She remembered the joy of music, how it could tell a story without words, and she let that feeling grow inside her. The hall was silent now, everyone waiting, curious about the young girl who had just taken the stage. Some adults whispered to each other, wondering if someone so young could really play something impressive. Some children in the audience leaned forward, excited to see what she would do. The little girl could feel the attention, but she tried to let it fade into the background, focusing instead on the piano in front of her. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. The first note rang out soft but clear. It was a small beginning, almost like a whisper, yet it held promise. She continued, the music starting to flow. Each finger moved with careful precision, guided by years of practice and a deep love for the instrument. She felt the notes under her fingertips and allowed her emotions to guide her, letting the music tell the story she wanted to share. Back in the audience, a few people started to notice the depth of her playing. There was something in the way she moved her hands, the way the notes connected and built upon each other. It was more than technical skill. It was feeling, expression, a sense that the music was alive. People began to lean forward, curious, some whispering to their neighbors about the little girl who was playing with such heart. As she continued, she became more confident. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier began to melt away, replaced by a focus and calm that made her feel at home on the stage. She imagined she was in her room again, with the sunlight streaming through the window and the piano keys familiar beneath her fingers. She let herself get lost in the music, in the story each note told. The hall, the audience, the lights, all faded until there was only her and the piano. The music swelled and softened, rising and falling like a gentle wave. She poured all her feelings into the performance, every moment a reflection of her heart. The audience sat silently, captivated by the skill and emotion coming from such a small child. No one had expected this. No one had anticipated the depth and maturity in the music, the way each note seemed to carry meaning beyond her age. As the last notes lingered, she held her hand still for a brief moment, savoring the sound that filled the room. There was a heartbeat of silence, almost as if the audience was catching their breath, trying to take in what they had just heard. Then slowly the hall erupted into applause. People clapped, cheered, and even stood up, some wiping tears from their eyes. She looked up, surprised and a little shy, as the sound washed over her. Her parents smiled proudly, their hearts full of joy and admiration. She felt a mix of pride and humility, happy that she had shared her music and that it had touched people. The applause was loud and enthusiastic, but more than that, it was recognition of the time, effort, and love she had poured into her piano playing. For the first time that day, she felt completely at ease on the stage, confident in herself and her gift. When she finally stood up and bowed slightly, the audience continued to cheer. She gave a small, shy wave and stepped off the stage, feeling a rush of happiness and relief. She had done it. She had faced her fears, shared her talent, and left an impression on everyone who had listened. Backstage, she hugged her parents tightly, feeling their warmth and pride surround her. The moment was unforgettable, a memory she would carry with her always. The start of something new and exciting in her life. Backstage after her performance, the little girl felt her heart still racing. She could hear the applause echoing in the hall, a sound that made her cheeks warm and her stomach flutter. She hugged her parents tightly, feeling their pride and love wrap around her like a comforting blanket. Even though she was shy, she realized that she had done something incredible. She had faced a big crowd and shared her music, and it had made people feel something. Her hands were still slightly trembling from the adrenaline, but she felt proud. It was the first time she truly understood that music could speak in ways words could not. She remembered her piano teacher telling her that music was about expressing yourself, about telling a story that others could feel. Today she had done just that. Her parents whispered encouraging words, telling her how amazing she had been, and she felt a small, shy smile grow on her face. As she walked through the backstage area, she noticed other performers preparing for their turns. Some looked nervous, pacing back and forth or practicing quietly. A few had been watching her performance on the stage monitors, and now their eyes followed her with curiosity and admiration. She realized that she had not only impressed the audience but also inspired her peers. It was a strange but wonderful feeling, knowing that her music had reached beyond just the crowd in the hall. Her mind wandered back to the first moments she had touched a piano. She remembered being very small, barely able to reach the keys, and how her parents had gently guided her fingers. Each note had been a discovery, each song a new adventure. She had spent hours learning the scales, the simple melodies, and slowly moving on to more complex pieces. Every mistake had been a lesson, every success a small celebration. She realized that all those quiet hours in her room had led to this moment, this chance to share her music with the world. The announcer called the next performer, and the backstage area buzzed with renewed energy. She found a quiet corner to sit for a moment, letting herself breathe and calm down. The rush of performing, the bright lights, and the intense focus had been exhilarating but also tiring. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, thinking about how much she loved playing the piano. She realized that even though performing in front of an audience could be scary, the joy of expressing herself through music outweighed her fears. People continued to file into the hall, taking their seats for the next performances. She could hear whispers of excitement, murmurs about the little girl who had just played. Some were speculating about her age, some about her talent, but all seemed impressed. The realization that her music had touched so many hearts made her feel both proud and humble. She understood that talent was not just about skill, but also about sharing something meaningful with others. As she watched from backstage, she noticed a few older children practicing their instruments. One boy was tuning his violin, looking tense and nervous. She remembered her own first times on stage, how she had felt unsure of herself. It was natural to feel afraid, she realized, but what mattered was pushing through that fear and allowing the music to shine. She whispered a small encouragement to herself, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. Her parents stayed close, occasionally checking in to make sure she had everything she needed. They reminded her that it was okay to feel nervous and that what she had accomplished was already remarkable. She felt their support deeply, understanding that their belief in her had helped her believe in herself. She thought about how fortunate she was to have such a loving and supportive family, and how their encouragement had shaped her journey in music. Meanwhile, in the audience, people were still talking about her performance. Some had been moved to tears, some had smiled with delight, and some simply sat in awe of the talent displayed by someone so young. Teachers and other musicians whispered to each other, discussing her technique and the emotion in her playing. She realized that her music had created an impact that went beyond the notes themselves. It had connected with people on a deeper level, something she had always hoped for but never fully understood until now. She began to think about the future. Performing today had given her a glimpse of what was possible, and she felt a spark of excitement. There were many more pieces to learn, many more stages to play on, and many more hearts to touch. She imagined herself continuing to grow as a musician, exploring different styles and expressing a wide range of emotions through the piano. The thought of all the possibilities filled her with hope and determination. The little girl also noticed that some of the adults in the audience were smiling warmly, as if reminded of the joy of discovering something pure and beautiful. She realized that music had the power to bridge generations, to bring people together, and to create moments that would be remembered long after the performance ended. She felt proud to be part of something so meaningful, even at her young age. As she prepared to leave backstage, she took a moment to reflect on what she had experienced. The nervous anticipation, the thrill of performing, the joy of sharing her music, and the warmth of the audience's response had all left a mark on her. She understood that this was more than just a talent show. It was a turning point in her life, a moment that would inspire her to continue pursuing her passion with even greater dedication. Her parents held her hand as they walked through the hall, people stopping to compliment her and ask questions. She answered shyly but politely, grateful for the attention and recognition. Each word of encouragement reinforced her belief in herself and her music. She realized that her journey was just beginning, and that there was so much more to learn, explore, and share. The day continued with other performances, but her mind often drifted back to her own experience. She replayed the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers, the sound of the music filling the hall, and the applause that had followed. Each memory strengthened her resolve to keep playing, to keep improving, and to keep sharing the joy of music with others. As the talent show drew to a close, she felt a sense of calm and satisfaction. She had faced her fears, performed with all her heart, and connected with an audience in a way that was both profound and unforgettable. She knew that this was only the beginning of her musical journey, and that there would be many more stages, challenges, and moments of triumph ahead. But for now, she allowed herself to simply feel the joy of what she had accomplished, carrying it with her as a source of inspiration and confidence for the future. The little girl woke up the next morning, with the memory of her performance still fresh in her mind. She could still feel the echo of the applause, the warmth of the audience's attention, and the pride her parents had shown. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every moment on stage, the sound of the piano, and the notes that had seemed to flow effortlessly from her fingers. She felt a mix of excitement and curiosity. She wanted to understand why playing in front of others had felt so different from playing in her room at home. It was as if her music had taken on a new life when it left her hands and touched the hearts of the listeners. Her parents came in quietly, smiling at her from the doorway. They didn't need to say much. Their eyes were full of pride and encouragement. They helped her get ready for the day, gently reminding her to practice a little more, not as a task, but as a chance to enjoy her favorite thing. She nodded, feeling the familiar excitement of sitting at the piano and discovering new melodies. Even after all the time she had spent playing, every practice felt like a small adventure, a journey where she could explore emotions and stories through music. Later, she returned to the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys with a natural grace. She tried to replicate the feeling she had on stage, the connection she had felt with the audience. It was different, of course, playing alone in her room, but she smiled as she realized that the magic she had experienced on stage came not just from the applause, but from the way she allowed herself to feel each note fully. She understood that music was not just about playing the right notes, but about expressing what was inside her. As she played, she remembered the looks on people's faces during her performance, the wide eyes, the smiles, and the occasional tears. She realized that her music had spoken to them, that they had understood her story without her saying a single word. This thought made her feel both humbled and inspired. She wanted to keep sharing her music, to continue touching hearts in ways that words could never reach. Later in the day, her parents took her to visit the local music school. She had been learning from a private teacher at home, but the school offered opportunities to meet other young musicians and to perform in different settings. She felt nervous at first, unsure about meeting new people and showing them what she could do. But as soon as she saw the other children with their instruments and heard the sounds filling the rooms, she felt a sense of belonging. It was a place where her love for music was understood and shared by others. She joined a small group of children in the practice room, where they were learning a simple ensemble piece. She watched them carefully, listening to the way their instruments blended together, and then she added her piano to the mix. The sound was richer than anything she had played alone. She felt a thrill of joy, realizing that music could not only express her own feelings but also create harmony and connection with others. The teachers noticed her skill and gentle approach, encouraging her to explore more challenging pieces and to experiment with dynamics and emotion in her playing. Over the next few days, she practiced diligently, excited by the new possibilities. She tried out different styles, from classical to simple modern tunes, and experimented with rhythms and expressions. She realized that the piano was a world of endless discovery, each piece a new story waiting to be told. She began to write down her own small compositions, pieces that reflected her feelings and imagination. Each note she played was like a brushstroke on a canvas, painting emotions that words could not capture. Her parents watched her with quiet amazement. They noticed how she seemed to grow more confident every day, not just in her skill but in the way she expressed herself. They could see that her love for music was not just a talent but a part of who she was. They encouraged her to keep exploring, to take every opportunity to play for others, and to never lose the joy that made her music special. One afternoon, she received a call from the community hall, inviting her to perform at a small local event. The organizers had heard about her talent and wanted her to play again. She felt a flutter of nerves but also excitement. She remembered the way it had felt to be on stage, the energy of the crowd and the sense of connection that music had brought. She realized that she was ready to face the audience again, to share her music and emotions with more people. The day of the event arrived, and she once again prepared herself backstage. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and imagined herself in her room at home playing for herself. That image brought a calmness and confidence that steadied her hands. When her name was called, she walked to the piano with a mixture of excitement and determination. She sat on the bench, adjusted her position, and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note resonated clearly, soft but full of life. She continued to play, letting the music flow naturally, guided by her emotions and imagination. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the depth and purity of her performance. She noticed a few familiar faces from the last show, smiling and nodding in encouragement. The sound of the piano filled the hall, carrying her feelings and stories to every corner. As she played, she felt a growing connection with the audience, a sense that her music was creating a shared experience. Each note, each chord, each pause held meaning and emotion. She experimented with dynamics, playing some parts softly and delicately, and others with strength and intensity. The music seemed to move on its own, guided by her heart and the energy of the room. After the performance, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. People clapped, cheered, and some even rose to their feet. She felt a warm glow of pride and happiness, but more importantly, she felt the joy of knowing that her music had touched others. Her parents hugged her tightly, their eyes shining with pride. The experience reinforced her love for music and her desire to continue sharing it with others. In the following weeks, she continued to practice and explore new pieces, always seeking ways to express herself more fully. She joined small recitals, played for family gatherings, and even experimented with composing short original pieces. Each experience helped her grow as a musician and as a person. She began to understand that music was not just a skill, but a way of connecting with others, of sharing feelings and stories that could not be expressed through words alone. She also began to notice how music affected those around her. Friends and family would listen intently, sometimes moved to tears or smiles, often asking her to play their favorite pieces. She realized that the joy she felt in playing was amplified when shared, and that her music could bring comfort, happiness, and inspiration. This understanding deepened her commitment to her craft and her desire to continue learning and growing. Through all these experiences, she maintained a sense of humility and curiosity. She knew that there was always more to learn, more to explore, and more ways to connect with her music and the people around her. She continued to practice diligently, not just to perform but to understand herself better, to communicate her emotions, and to bring joy to others. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and she embraced them with enthusiasm and dedication. The little girl realized that her journey with music was just beginning. The stage, the audience, and the applause were wonderful, but the true joy came from the way music allowed her to express herself and touch the hearts of others. She felt grateful for the support of her parents, teachers, and community, and for the gift of music that had become such an important part of her life. She knew that no matter where her journey took her, she would always carry the lessons, experiences, and emotions that music had given her, and that she would continue to share them with the world in her own unique way. The little girl's life began to change slowly after her performances at the community hall and local events. She was still the same shy, quiet child in many ways, but there was a new spark in her eyes, a quiet confidence that showed she had discovered something special. Her love for the piano continued to grow, and she spent hours each day practicing and exploring new melodies. But now her music was not only for herself. She had seen the effect it had on others, and that gave her purpose and motivation beyond just playing well. One morning she woke up early, the sunlight spilling across her bedroom floor. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the familiar weight of the piano and the comfort it always brought. She was working on a new piece, something more challenging than anything she had attempted before. Her parents watched from the doorway, impressed with her dedication and focus. They never pushed her, but they encouraged her to follow her heart and continue improving. Today, she felt ready to try a part of the piece she had been practicing for weeks. The notes were tricky, but she tackled them with determination. She played slowly at first, making sure every key sounded right, every chord blended with the others. She listened carefully, adjusting her timing and touch. Gradually, the piece began to flow, and she smiled, knowing she was improving. Music had always been her companion, but now it felt like a partner in a conversation, responding to her thoughts and feelings. Later that week, she was invited to perform at a small-town festival. This event was larger than the community talent show, with more people and a bigger stage. Backstage, she felt the familiar nervous flutter in her stomach, but she remembered all the times she had faced an audience before. She focused on the music, the joy it brought her, and the connection it could create. Her parents held her hands briefly, reminding her to breathe and enjoy the moment. As she walked to the piano on stage, the bright lights seemed more intense than before. The audience's chatter faded into a quiet hum, and she felt the energy in the room, a mix of anticipation and curiosity. She sat on the bench, adjusted her posture, and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note resonated clearly, carrying her feelings into the hall. She began to play, letting the music flow naturally, guided by both her practice and her emotions. The audience listened in awe, captivated by the depth of expression coming from someone so young. They could feel the story she was telling through the music, the way each note carried emotion and meaning. Parents leaned forward in their seats. Children watched with wide eyes, and even older musicians nodded in approval. She felt a sense of connection, realizing that her music was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in the room. During the performance, she allowed herself to experiment. She played some sections softly, almost like a whisper, then gradually built the intensity, creating a wave of sound that filled the hall. Each note was carefully chosen, each chord deliberate, reflecting the feelings she wanted to express. She lost herself in the music, forgetting the stage, the lights, and even the audience, focusing only on the story she was telling through her piano. When she reached the final notes, she held them briefly, savoring the lingering sound before gently releasing her hands from the keys. The hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was absorbing the experience, and then the applause erupted. People clapped enthusiastically, some rose to their feet, and others smiled broadly, clearly moved by her performance. She felt a warm glow of pride and joy, but also a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she played, not just for skill or recognition, but for the connection and emotion it created. After the performance, people approached her to compliment her playing. Some were adults who had seen many musicians, some were children who wanted to know how she learned to play so well. She answered shyly, grateful for their words, but most of all happy that her music had made a difference. Her parents hugged her tightly, proud and emotional, seeing their daughter grow not only as a musician, but as a person who could inspire others through her talent. Over the following weeks, more opportunities began to appear. Small invitations to play at local gatherings, school events, and even community ceremonies came her way. Each time she felt a mix of nerves and excitement, but she also knew that her music could create joy, comfort, and inspiration. The experiences reinforced her love for the piano and her desire to continue learning and sharing. She also began composing her own short pieces, experimenting with melodies that reflected her thoughts and feelings. She discovered that writing her own music was another way to express herself, a personal conversation with the piano that could eventually reach others. Each new composition was a reflection of her experiences, dreams, and emotions, and she found great satisfaction in hearing her own creations come to life under her fingers. Her teachers noticed her progress and encouraged her to continue exploring different styles and techniques. They praised not only her technical skill but also her ability to convey emotion and connect with her audience. She realized that music was more than just playing notes correctly. It was about telling a story, sharing feelings, and creating an experience for others to enjoy. One afternoon, she was asked to play at a small charity event. She felt nervous knowing that there would be people from outside her town, some of whom were professional musicians and community leaders. But she remembered the joy she had felt during previous performances, the connection she had made with the audience, and the power of music to bring people together. She focused on the piano, letting her fingers move naturally over the keys, and began to play. The room grew quiet as she performed, the sound of the piano filling every corner. People listened intently, captivated by the beauty and emotion in her music. She noticed a few adults with tears in their eyes, and children leaning forward, completely absorbed. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that her music was making a positive impact, and that her efforts to share her talent were meaningful. After the performance, she received warm praise and encouragement from many people. Some asked her to play again, others shared stories of how her music had touched them. She felt proud, but also humble, understanding that her gift was something to nurture and share, not something to boast about. Her parents beamed with pride, happy to see their daughter growing in confidence, skill, and empathy. As she continued to practice and perform, she began to notice her own growth. She could play more complex pieces, express deeper emotions through her music, and handle the nerves of performing in front of others with greater ease. But beyond technical skill, she had developed a sense of purpose and understanding. She realized that music was not only a personal journey, but also a way to connect with others, to bring joy, comfort, and inspiration into their lives. Her journey was still only beginning, but she felt ready for the challenges and opportunities ahead. She looked forward to every new piece, every audience, and every moment at the piano. She understood that her love for music, combined with practice, patience, and emotion, could create experiences that were powerful and unforgettable. And with that realization, she continued to play, letting her music carry her forward, touching hearts wherever she went, and growing as both a musician and a young person, discovering the world through her passion. The little girl continued to grow as a pianist and as a person. Each day brought new challenges, new pieces to learn, and new opportunities to share her music. She practiced diligently, often losing track of time as her fingers danced over the keys, discovering new melodies and experimenting with different styles. Her parents watched with quiet pride, always ready to support her without putting pressure, allowing her love for music to guide her journey. She began receiving invitations to play at local events, school functions, and community gatherings. Each performance was an adventure, filled with excitement and a touch of nervousness. She learned to manage her stage fright by focusing on the joy of playing and the connection she felt with the audience. Over time, she realized that her music could create moments of shared emotion, bringing people together and allowing them to experience something beautiful and memorable. One afternoon, she was asked to perform at a regional music festival. It was a bigger stage, with more people and a few professional musicians in the audience. Backstage, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but she reminded herself of all the performances she had done before, and the joy she felt while playing. Her parents encouraged her, giving her a reassuring smile as she walked toward the piano. She took a deep breath, sat down, and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys, feeling the instrument's familiar presence. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper. Gradually building in strength and emotion, she allowed the music to guide her, moving with confidence and grace, her fingers telling the story she had been practicing for weeks. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the purity and depth of her playing. Each note carried feeling. Each chord was a part of a larger story, and the audience could sense her passion and dedication. It was a performance that went beyond technical skill. It was an expression of her heart and soul. As she played, she noticed the reactions of the people around her. Some were smiling, others had tears in their eyes, and many were leaning forward, completely absorbed. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, understanding that her music could touch lives and create lasting memories. It was more than applause. It was a connection, a shared experience that transcended words. She realized that every hour spent practicing, every mistake corrected, and every piece learned had led to this moment, allowing her to make a real impact through her music. After the performance, the audience erupted into applause, cheering and clapping enthusiastically. She felt a warm glow of pride, but more importantly, a sense of purpose. Her parents hugged her tightly, their eyes filled with tears of joy. She had faced a larger crowd, performed with emotion and confidence, and left a lasting impression. She realized that the journey of learning and sharing her music was just as important as the recognition she received. In the weeks that followed, she continued to explore her musical abilities. She experimented with composition, creating short pieces that reflected her thoughts, emotions, and experiences. She discovered the joy of expressing herself in new ways, learning how to convey different moods, stories, and feelings through her music. Each new composition was a small adventure, a personal journey that she could share with others when she performed. Her teachers noticed her growth and encouraged her to continue exploring, praising not only her technical skill, but also her ability to convey emotion and connect with the audience. They suggested new challenges, such as more complex pieces and different musical styles to help her develop further. She embraced each opportunity, eager to learn and improve, but always keeping the love and joy of playing at the center of her journey. The little girl also began to understand the importance of inspiring others through her music. She would sometimes play for younger children, teaching them simple melodies and sharing the excitement of discovering music. She realized that her passion could encourage others to explore their own talents and find joy in creative expression. This sense of responsibility and generosity added a new dimension to her love for music, making her performances even more meaningful. One day, she was invited to perform at a charity event for a local hospital. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, knowing that her music could bring comfort and happiness to patients and families. Backstage, she took a deep breath and focused on the piano, imagining the joy and relief her music could provide. As she began to play, the room fell silent and the music filled the space with warmth and emotion. People listened attentively, moved by the purity and sincerity of her performance. Afterward, many approached her to express their gratitude, telling her how her music had brightened their day and brought them peace. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that her talent had a positive impact on others. It was a reminder that music was not only about skill or recognition, but about sharing something meaningful and touching the lives of those who listened. As time went on, she continued to perform, practice, and compose, growing both as a musician and as a person. Each new experience brought challenges, learning opportunities, and moments of joy. She remained humble and curious, always seeking ways to improve and explore her potential. Her love for music remained the driving force in her life, guiding her decisions, inspiring her creativity, and giving her purpose. Through all these experiences, she discovered that talent was not just about skill, but about dedication, passion, and the willingness to share oneself with others. She learned that music could create connections, evoke emotions, and inspire people in ways that words alone could not. She felt grateful for her supportive family, teachers, and community. Understanding that their encouragement and guidance had helped her reach this point, the little girl's journey was still unfolding, and she knew there would be many more stages, performances, and opportunities ahead. She looked forward to each one with excitement, ready to embrace the challenges and joys that came with sharing her music. She understood that her gift was not just for herself but for the world around her, and she was determined to continue growing, learning, and inspiring others through her piano playing. She often reflected on how far she had come, from the quiet practice sessions in her room to the large stages and appreciative audiences. Each step had been a lesson in patience, perseverance, and self-expression. She realized that every note she played, every piece she learned, and every performance she gave contributed to her growth, not just as a musician, but as a young person discovering her place in the world. Even as she became more confident and skilled, she never lost the joy that had sparked her love for the piano in the first place. She continued to play with curiosity, emotion, and a sense of wonder, embracing each new piece and performance with enthusiasm. Her journey with music was a story of passion, dedication, and the power of sharing oneself with others. In the end, she understood that her music was a gift, not just for her but for everyone who had the chance to hear it. She felt proud of what she had accomplished, but also humble and grateful for the opportunity to touch lives with her talent. Her love for the piano and her desire to share her music would continue to guide her, shaping her future, inspiring others, and creating moments of beauty and connection wherever she went. She had discovered that music was more than just notes and melodies. It was a way to connect, to inspire, and to make the world a little brighter through the power of her talent and heart.